talk about that, about how
I would say, what do I always say? Offense or defense?
I don't know.
Offense,
I would hope.
always.
Say you need to be nice. Going.
Okay. If you could take your seats, everyone. I now call this regular meeting of the Board of Education to order at 7:02 p.m. We'll take a moment of silence to be followed by the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. I'll have the coordinator call the roll.
Mr. Dixon?
Here.
Mr. Rollins? Mr. Scrivano?
Here.
Mrs. McCulloch?
Here.
Mr. Siegel?
Here.
Mr. Connor?
Here.
Mr. Escobedo? With 6 present, 1 absent, we have a quorum.
Thank you. I don't think we have anyone helping with the media tonight for Channel 20, but probably Alan's taking care of that for us. So Alan, wherever you are, thank you, buddy. We'll now recognize and celebrate outstanding contributions of our students and staff. Mr. Earl Dotson Jr. will make a presentation.
Good evening, Mr. President. Good evening, board members.
Nice tie.
Thank you, sir.
All right, okay.
Thank you, sir.
You bet.
That's right. Ted Biondo's resume is impressive after working at Hamilton Sunstrand for 31 years, managing the design of multi-million-dollar projects, using advanced technology to test power systems for aircraft. But we likely know Mr. Biondo best as a taxpayer, watchdog, and volunteer for the Rockford community and Rockford Public Schools. Mr. Biondo first volunteered to serve on the Finance Committee as a community member in the 1990s before serving as a school board member and Finance Committee chairman. He also volunteered to help the district pass 2 referendums to support Rockford Public Schools and its students. Meantime, working as a tireless advocate for students and taxpayers alike. Mr. Biondo was tapped again to serve on the district's Finance Committee in 2011, a post from which he now plans to step down. 10 years ago, Mr. Biondo was a finalist for the Rockford Register-Star's Excalibur Award, and his words then are still fitting today. Education is the lifeblood of any community. Through my community involvement, I hope to leverage educational achievement by providing that opportunity to others. Thank you, Mr. Biondo, for your dedication and service to Rockford Public Schools, its students, and our community. Please join me in thanking and congratulating Mr. Ted Biondo for his service to our community. Before he shakes your hands, he wants to say a few words.
Yeah.
All right.
Thank you.
We'll be here for a while.
Okay.
Yes. No. It's going to be
Okay.
less than a minute. I just wanted to thank Dr. Jarrett and Mr. Dotson and the Board of Education and the district for recognizing my volunteerism for the Rockford Public Schools on and off for over 20-some years. And the other things were there. I even forgot a couple. Thank you. I just wanted to say, when talking about education, my mom basically made it through the 4th grade. My dad made it through the 8th. Every day I heard, you're not going to live like this. You're going to get an education and graduate from college. I said, yeah, right. And I achieved those goals and helped put men on the moon in the 60s and 70s, and that's why I've tried to emphasize to others over the years the advantages of succeeding in life through education. Thank you, everyone, for the recognition.
Great, Ted. Great job, Ted. thank you for everything. Great job. Okay.
Thank you so much for your service.
Okay. Okay. Thank you, sir. We are now at the petitions and communications portions of our meeting when we invite the public to make comments. The First Amendment of the United States Constitution guarantees the rights of citizens to petition their government, as well as provides for freedom of speech. Also, the Illinois School Code requires that there be time at regular and special meetings for public comment. Thus, we are following those mandates during this petitions and communications portion of our agenda. According to Board Policy 2.230, the public comments portion of the meeting is limited to a total of 30 minutes. The board will not respond to comments at this time. If it is appropriate, you'll be contacted in a timely manner by staff in response to your questions. In order to allow sufficient time for the business of the board and to conduct our meeting in an efficient and effective manner, we are requesting that you comply with the guidelines that are posted, and each speaker will be allowed no more than 2 minutes to address the board. So if it is not appropriate to address individual board members or individual administrators or discuss matters that would be otherwise confidential in such open meetings. I will call two names first, the person whose turn it is to speak and the person who is next. If you're the next person, please come to the front so that you can be ready and sit in the chair up by the front, and we can devote the most time to our public comments that we have. If you look at the wall over here, we have a 2-minute clock, which will help you with your 2 minutes. We thank you for your interest and for your cooperation with our guidelines. So our first speaker tonight is Ricky Naylor, to be followed by James Ireland. Ricky Naylor. And if you'll hit the button to turn the microphone on, sir. Didn't. Thank you.
Thank you for having me here. I just want to kind of address the issue, with what happened. As you guys said about not mentioning names, but we know this coach who got fired. I'm just here to support these young men here, and I just think that what you guys did is just a disservice to these guys. I mean, this school was supposed to be about these kids, but I'm thinking, it's about you guys. You're not caring about what they need. It's about what you need, which is to get rid of somebody. I mean, just getting back to this whole thing again, there's no trust. This continues to be one big dysfunctional organization. And then when you guys tell these kids to stop bullying, when you fire somebody for no reason, that's bullying. And it's violence. It's economical violence. And then, you lose your job, you can't pay your bills, or you can't do what you want to do. That's economic violence. So you need to look at what you're doing and say, are we being real role models, to these kids? And then plus, in a sense, I don't even see this place still not. Where is the black leadership? I mean, if you had that around here, when you have issue with a black employee and a white employee, you got somebody to at least come in there and say, okay, whatever this guy was doing, whatever, I don't know, I wasn't there, to say, okay, if he was doing stuff they shouldn't have been doing, if you had the black leadership and said, look, man, stop doing this, but it don't need to always come down to these terminations. And what I see around here, I see two standards. I see standards for white employees, standards for black employees that go along and get along, and I see the other standard is for black employees decide to speak out. You guys send a message out. Keep your mouth shut. You want to keep your job, keep your mouth shut. And I'm not opposed to a guy making $100,000 a year. I might be quiet too, but I don't make $100,000 a year. I haven't made it, so I don't know if I be quiet or not. But until you guys get some black leadership in here, other minority leadership in here, don't even say you include things, because you don't. Look around here. Where is it?
Thank you, Mr. Naylor. Mr. Ireland, James Ireland, to be followed by Marquise Thomas.
My name is James Ireland. I come from a different background. By the time I was 30 years old, I was in charge of a 650 inmate cell block with 7 to 10 employees over the course of a week at a maximum security penitentiary, Stateville in Joliet, Illinois. What I am asking of this board is the authorization to go into either West Middle School or Kennedy Middle School to assist the teacher and giving the children a thirst for learning. We knew, when I was working at the prison, we knew that those students that were failing in reading, writing, and mathematics, that it would just be a matter of time before they came to us. And what I have a program that starts out in 6th and 7th grade teaching mathematics and giving them a thirst for knowledge. As you see, I'm carrying 3 airplanes with us. Their math class would be the last class of the day. The class after their math class would be building model aircraft. And the real test of how well they have done at building the aircraft is how well it flies. By the time they would enter the senior in high school, they will have been doing things at a university in which their junior and senior year majoring in aerodynamics, and the purpose is to give them a thirst for life, for learning. Without that, they are not going to put you behind the controls of an F-16 Falcon.
Thank you, Mr. Ireland. I'm sorry your time is up. Marquise Thomas, to be followed by Tanner Smith.
I want to say, basically, I want to know, you heard it, a good team from a role model, like Coach Buck, we weren't supposed to say, but he's like a good role model for all of us. And he helped us all, he showed us different ways and everything. He was just a good handful of help. And he was a good role model for us too, and helping us recruit, get us all to college. And y'all taking something good away from us, he's a good person to have for this community and help everybody else, get to college. That's really all I got to say.
Thank you. Tanner Smith, to be followed by Tayron Jordan.
I'd like to say our coach was, like my fellow fellow teammates said, that he was a good role model for the team, and he helped out a lot. He sent the most kids off to college out of high school in RPS out of all the high schools. How many high schools do you see actually sending kids off and getting them out of Rockford and want to help the kids? Not a lot of coaches want to do that. Coach DuBose is one of them. Coach DuBose also helped out with the kids. He gave kids something they didn't have. Let's say a kid didn't have a meal that day. He bought a kid a meal. He showed so much love for the kids, like their own, like he was their own. Like he loved every last one of them, no matter what ethnicity, how you acted, what you believe in. Everything came down to you were one of his. He wanted to show the kids not just a way to be a football player, but the way to be a man in life. He wanted to show us he wanted us to grow up and be something in life and not actually be another Rockford person, a drug addict, in the streets, selling drugs. He doesn't want us to be that. He wants us to be something bigger. He wants us to be in college, getting our education, showing something, and bringing back something to Rockford. Rockford does not have a lot. We want to show. No, the players want to show that go to Jefferson. They actually want to show that there is something to there's something to prove for. There's something to prove for Rockford. Man, I'm done. I don't know.
Thank you. Okay, good job. Tayron Jordan, to be followed by James Dunner.
Yeah, I think what you guys do is not right because, I was at Jefferson from whenever Coach Babcock was there before he even got there. And, the whole school spirit was dying down. We ain't had nobody coming out to the games, anything. And it was my senior year, I think. Yeah, he, everybody just started getting back into rhythm. And, if he had more time with us, it would have been even better. We could have had better college opportunities. But, he made us think about stuff that other coaches didn't, like grades and... you gotta have a good GPA or a good ACT score, or like, and most coaches never even talked about going to the next level with most kids, and he did that. And if you guys do that, how many kids would be without like good coaches and scholarships and chances, and you guys are gonna affect a lot if you guys do fire them. And yeah, that's all.
Thank you.
That's all I have to say.
James Dunner?
I just wanted to say, because the Bowes was a big part of the Jefferson football program. Before he came, there wasn't really a football team. He came and changed everything around. He brought kids. He made kids want to come out and join the program. He believed in a lot of kids that didn't believe in themselves. He really,
You're doing fine.
really not that. I mean, it's really, we just don't get why you fired a good coach that was doing their job. That's really all I got to say.
Okay, thank you. We thank you all for your interest and your cooperation with our guidelines. So now ask if there are any board member comments at this time. Ms. McCulloch?
I'm just going to take another minute to say thank you to Mr. Biondo. Personally, he's been a mentor to me as a board member. But even more, what he's done for this district from a financial standpoint in working us out of that lawsuit, out from under federal control, saved us. You've told me how many times, Ted, how many millions of dollars it saved us. But it allowed us to start taking control of our own district again and really focus on our students. And so I said to him today, well, a piece of paper hardly counts for the countless hours and years of dedication you've given and voluntarily given. I mean, just like everybody else up here who's a board member, we don't get paid for doing this. And Mr. Biondo didn't get paid for being a board member. He didn't get paid for being a committee member. He did it because he loved education and he wanted education to be better in Rockford and the community to be better. And just heartfelt thanks for all that you did for this community and for this district.
Great job. Thank you. Mr. Rollins.
I just want to comment that nothing that I haven't actually said before, which is that one of my least favorite parts of the job, or position, because it's not a job, and most difficult is personnel decisions. And one of the reasons I find it difficult is because we kind of tie our hands behind our backs. We say we can't discuss personnel matters, and we do that to protect the employee. So the employee is free to go out there and say things and talk about things, but we're not at liberty to respond. And we make that clear whenever we talk about personnel matters. It's a personnel matter, we're not at liberty to respond. And so people draw all sorts of conclusions. A few years ago, I talked to our legal counsel and I said, well, is there any reason why we couldn't allow the employee to sign a release? Say, allow the district to release their personnel file, release the reasons for the termination, and she actually told me, no, there's no reason why we can't do that. So ever since then, I've made this offer repeatedly. I made it for the first time probably 4 years ago, maybe 5 years ago. I made it in connection with another coach termination about a year ago. I'll make it again tonight. If the employee wants to come to the district and sign a release allowing us to talk about the reasons for the termination, they are free to do that. My only other comment is that I will say, because this doesn't get into the reasons, is that nothing that I have seen reported has anything to do with the recommendation of the administration or the decision of the board tonight.
Thank you. Mr. Siegel.
A little lighter note. I've had a couple of incidences in the last week where I have seen some pretty serious love for 205 that stretched from the far southwest side of town to the far northeast. I work in a camera store, and a woman came in yesterday wearing a shirt that looks like this. They're just shouting out 205. I said, oh, you got kids in 205? She said, no, but I used to. And they turned out great. All right, that's pretty cool. I also had an incident down at City Market where I waited forever to go to the food truck at 15th and Chris. And when I got up there, I didn't really know what I wanted, but I saw that they had a sandwich called 205. And it was hands down, this is, by the way, not an infomercial, but it was hands down the best sandwich I have ever eaten, bar none. I went up to the proprietor, his name's James Purifoy, and told him that was a really amazing sandwich. And he said, I had to make a sandwich that's as good as the schools that produced me. He said, that's right, I am a product of 205. He said, no one gets to disrespect a teacher, a bus driver, a lunch lady, and let me hear about it. It was really pretty impressive that this is a person who's got a very successful business that he's running, and he's able to sprinkle his love for 205 into his business. And honestly, if you want the most amazing sandwich ever, get down to 15th and Chris and get a 205.
All right.
Okay, became an infomercial.
Mr. Dixon.
It's good to have the community come out tonight. Students, parents, community members. Believe it or not, we all want the same thing. We want good education for our kids. We want a healthy, safe environment for them, and we want everything to be fair and equal. I want to thank you for coming out and sharing your passion and your concerns and making your statement. Don't ever forget that. You make a difference. And so thank you for that. And one more note before I leave is come out more often. Don't let this be the only time that you come out is when there is a crisis. Come out and get involved and speak your concerns more often. You don't know the effect that you have. So I will leave it as that.
Thank you. I guess I have one comment, and then I'll get back to you. I just want to thank Matt Zedeker and the administrative team for allowing me to have the opportunity to speak this past week and talk about leadership and the vision of the district and the direction the board wants to go with all of the new leaders. I think there's about 50 of them on that Tuesday, and then on Friday you had your big retreat with about 250 people. So I appreciate being asked to give a talk and the opportunity to speak with some really wonderful people. So, Ms. McCulloch, did you have another?
I too want to thank everybody who came out to speak, and also I'd actually like to apologize for the distraction that this has all caused in your lives and where you're at in your careers as athletes and as students. I think it's disheartening when adult issues get in the way of students and they're being able to do their best, and so I'm really sorry for that. And again, if Mr. Rollins' offer is accepted, you might know more about things, but we just can't talk about everything. But I'm really proud of you for being here and for your support that you've given and the love you have for your coach. And again, I am sorry that adult issues get in the way sometimes. So good luck to you this season. I hope it's a successful one for you.
Thank you. Okay. If there are no other board member comments, we'll move on to the consent portion of our agenda, including the following items: the meeting minutes from July 11th, 2017, payroll, accounts payable, purchase orders, construction bid pay request log, contracts under $10,000, and travel. The bid recommendation for Carlson Elementary School gymnasium addition and renovations. The recurring contracts for Forecast 5 Analytics, Circles of Learning contract, the recurring contract with teaching artists Kate Kilgore, Pam Peterson, and Jacques St. Cyr, and Ted Stavro, the recurring contract with Kennedy Center presenter Peg Kosh, let's see, the recurring contract with Stuart Stotts, and the ILS Ombudsman Addendum, Special Education Services for Students, and the other consent items, including the Cumberland Therapy Service teacher, the staff rehab social work teacher, AFSCME nutrition tentative agreement, the AFSCME paraprofessional tentative agreement, the recurring annual recognition of Title I plans, the workers' compensation settlement, the freedom of information log, the resolution authorizing and directing preparation of the tentative 2018-19 budget, and the monthly investment report for June of 2017. Is there a motion and a second to approve these consent items?
So moved.
Moved by Mr. Connor.
Second.
Second by Mr. Siegel. Are there any consent items that board members wish to have pulled for separate consideration? Mr. Rollins?
9B.
9B. Ms. McCullough?
You got 9B, 9C through H.
9C through H, okay. Any other, Mr. Dixon?
So I can do it now?
Nope. Mr. Connor?
10D.
10D, okay. The coordinator then call the roll on the approval of consent items not pulled.
Mr. Dixon?
Yes.
Mr. Rollins?
Yes.
Mr. Scrivano?
Yes.
Mrs. McCullough?
Yes.
Mr. Siegel?
Yes.
Mr. Connor?
Yes.
The motion passes with 6 yeses, 1 absent.
Thank you. I'll take a motion in a second now for the approval of item 9B, which is the Circle of Learning contract.
So moved.
Moved by Mr. Connor.
Second.
Second by Mr. Siegel. Questions or discussion? Ms. McCullough. I see Ms. Nelson back there.
Right. So, we once a year have an update about early childhood. We haven't had it just recently about this, but since it's a special program with all students, early childhood students who are there all day, I'm wondering, and with the board's focus on achievement and metrics, so we have a program where we're expending additional resources, and what kind of, are we seeing outcomes? Because there was a new state test you told us about at the last Ed Committee meeting, I think that you were going to be using as a, so can you speak to the board about the success of that program, and maybe a little bit about how it's different than what we're doing throughout the rest of the district, and how it's tied to that grant and those pieces? Thanks.
Okay, so the Circles of Learning collaboration is a long-standing collaboration that we've had with the child care here in our area. One of the key pieces to our early childhood grant is they like us to work out in the community to support aligning efforts through the community, birth through 3rd grade. Early on in the development of the Preschool for All programs, they encourage these types of collaborations. The Circles of Learning contract began before I was the director, so I can't tell you exactly how many years we've had it, but what we would want to look for in a collaboration partner is someone who would be interested in collaborating with us, following district guidelines as well as our grant guidelines, as well as us being able to support their guidelines with DCFS, and Circles of Learning has been a great partner there. So what we have at Circles of Learning that's different from the rest of our preschool program is we have full-day classrooms there. Students are actually enrolled in the child care, and then we provide the district certified teacher to implement the district curriculum. We complete all the assessments on the students. So students, we don't just place students in the child care, they're actually enrolled there at the child care. Our overall goal is to increase readiness when children get to kindergarten, so by being out in the community, it can help support a lot of our students whose families need that full day option because of work. The savings to the district is that we do not operate the building. There's no money exchanging hands. They provide the second set of hands, or the assistant teacher, in the classroom, so we do not have to, out of our grant, pay for a paraprofessional for the classrooms. They are also allowing us to use one additional classroom for our regular half-day preschool program that is staffed by our teacher and our para at no cost to us, so that's also a savings. As far as long-term outcomes, what we have seen with Circles of Learning is initially in our preschool assessment, in the fall, the kids are actually doing much better than kids that have had that summer off, because the children are in child care throughout the whole entire summer. By the end of the year, they are making about the same amount of growth as our students in our half-day program. As far as how they do in kindergarten, the assessment tool that I was speaking with the Education Committee last January about is called the KIDS. It's the Kindergarten Individual Developmental Survey. That's going to be given to all kindergarten students in Illinois for the first time this year. So I don't have any metrics on that as far as how do students do on that we're in a half-day program versus a full-day program. Now, the district also has in our own buildings a full-day preschool program that is funded by another grant. It's called Preschool Expansion. That model is based off of a more comprehensive approach to students who are at higher risk. So students in that program have to be at or below 200% of poverty in order to be even eligible. And then we have to go through a variety of other risk factors in order to place them, and we're charged with placing the highest needs children in that program. Just for comparison, that full-day program last year, 33% of the children enrolled in that program were homeless. This year, our enrollment for that program is hitting our top 4 indicators, which are 50% of poverty, homeless, students who are enrolled in the foster care program, or students with a developmental delay. We're most likely going to fill all 120 of those full-day seats with students in those top 4 eligibility risk factors. So the Circles of Learning is a full-day option that doesn't have those risk factors tied to it. It's just another type of collaboration.
But in the Circles of Learning, our teachers that we provide work full day with one class of students as compared to in our regular early childhood program where those teachers would have 2 sets of students during the day.
Yep, we do serve 20 students versus 40 when we're in that collaboration.
So it is a little bit more expensive, and hopefully in January when we look at it, I think it's great to hear that they come back and they've been stimulated all summer and they're ahead, but if we're all caught up at the end, I mean, if they're already ahead at the beginning, I would hope, I don't know about the other board members, but look for some even further growth throughout the year. So those metrics will be in.
And it's a different type of population too, just so you know. Most of the families out there are working. So it provides a service to families that do live in District 205 for that collaboration. And we're going to be writing for our new grant this next year. So when we've written for the grant before, we get points. I don't know how to say it. Points for having these type of collaborations. We are highly encouraged to have them. But that's one reason we have the one. And, you know, as the new grant requests for proposals come out, we'll have to look if there's any other opportunities or what they say in the grant language, you know, for continuation or expansion of that. But it also provides us with space that we are, you know, we're full in our other centers. So it provides us space to reach additional students.
Okay. Mr. Rollins.
Was this the multi-year federal grant that we got?
So the preschool expansion grant is the multi-year federal grant, and that is, well, that's a 4-year grant, I should say that. The multi-year grant that we get from the state of Illinois is a 3-year, typically a 3-year grant.
This one that's supporting the Circles
This
of
is
Learning?
the 3-year state grant.
That's the state grant? Okay, thanks.
Any other questions or comments? Thank you. We'll have the coordinator then call the roll on the approval of item 9B, the Circles of Learning contract.
Mr. Rollins?
Abstain?
Mr. Scrivano?
Yes.
Mrs. McCulloch?
Yes.
Mr. Siegel?
Yes.
Mr. Connor?
Yes.
Mr. Dixon?
Yes.
The motion passes with 5 yeses, 1 abstain, 1 absent.
Ms. McCulloch, okay if I do C through H altogether? Those are all the recurring contracts, so I'll take a motion and a second then for the approval of items 9C through 9H.
So moved.
Moved by Mr. Connor.
Second.
Second by Mr. Siegel. Questions and discussions? Dr. Wolf is here.
So the same as with preschool, just because we have a grant doesn't, you know, and people are going to give us money, we need to be able to demonstrate that it's affecting our achievement. I think that the board has, again, said very strongly what we're looking at is achievement. So this grant, my understanding is by bringing in these artists is going to affect their math skills. And so if we're going to considered a recurring contract, and we're going to bring these people back again. Can you tell us what kind of metrics that you're using to demonstrate that students who are involved with these artists are having more success with math and greater achievement than students who aren't having that same exposure?
Absolutely. Thank you for the opportunity. When Dr. Jarrett gave me and there are actually 2 grants to manage, I was more on the Lord have mercy side, and after a couple of years now I'm on the thank you Jesus side. We have seen an awful lot of good progress with our students. The federal mandated report is on our website. If you go to RPS 205 About Us, Improvement and Innovation, you can see the full report. Both of them are over 30-some pages.
Okay.
30 minutes, right?
Okay.
The one that you referenced, the math one, is out of the AEMDD program. We call it the Rockford Arts Infusion, where it went to Kennedy and Flynn in particular, and then their feeder elementary schools. The concept that was written was that arts integration matters, and in fact, Changing Education Through the Arts, which is a Washington, D.C. initiative, and the President Obama's Committee on the Arts and Humanities found arts integration to be statistically significant in improving student achievement, and so they ramped up that program, and in FY15 was the first year that Title I funds were allowed to be used for arts integration. So we have a broad base of research that indicates that that concept is actually valid. We have had some success, not as great as we would like. I think the concept behind it is correct. We, as a team, didn't execute the writing of it correctly. Teachers were not included in the ground floor on that, and so we've worked on opting in. So our implementation has not been as strong. I think when you look at the Kennedy School Improvement Grant, where we did it where we're stronger together, the teachers were in from the very beginning and are actually leading the implementation. That, I think, would have allowed our AEMDD results to more approximate the national averages, but we're making progress, and we looked at DEA, we now look at MAP. We looked at ISAT, we're now looking at PARC. We've looked at discipline referrals, we've looked at student attendance, we've looked at all those multiple indicators. We've also looked at staff responses on professional development surveys. Will this improve your practice? How do you feel about it? The other federal grant was PDAE, Professional Development for Arts Educators, using arts integration to improve teachers' practice in all 5 of the art forms. We're entering the 3rd year of that program, and we're gaining strength on that. Our report is on the website. We've not only used that in those classes, but it's been part of the conceptual basis for our summer program, where we used arts integration with Peg Coach from the Smithsonian Institution. And we would invite you to our demonstration, the Arts Expo, on August 16th, where we're partnering with CAPA and the Rockford Area Arts Council. Stuart Stotts will be here, pending board approval of the contract. And we will be in this room and in the basement to demonstrate what our students and teachers are doing, and how we have several community partners who will be here talking to educators as well about that.
Okay. Any other questions or comments? Thank you. The coordinator then call the roll on the approval of items 9C through H, the recurring contracts.
Mr. Scrivano?
Yes.
Mrs. McCulloch?
Yes.
Mr. Siegel?
Yes.
Mr. Connor?
Yes.
Mr. Dixon?
Yes.
Mr. Rollins?
Yes.
The motion passes with 6 yeses, 1 absent.
Thank you. Our next item is, I'll take a motion and a second for the approval of the ASME 692 paraprofessional tentative agreement.
So moved.
Moved by Mr. Rollins, second by Mr. Siegel. Any questions or discussion? Now I'll have the coordinator then call the roll on the approval of item 10D, the AFSCME 692 paraprofessional agreement.
Mrs. McCulloch?
This is what you should be reporting on. Yes. We've been working on this contract forever. We had a strike about it, and it's so exciting that we're going to vote on it tonight, a contract, and start the school with it. So I'm just kind of like, This is important
Yeah.
stuff.
Okay.
Yes.
Thank you. Okay.
Mr. Siegel,
An equally enthusiastic yes.
Mr. Connor,
Abstain.
Mr. Dixon,
Yes.
Mr. Rollins?
Yes.
Mr. Scrivano?
Yes.
The motion passes with 5 yeses, 1 abstain, 1 absent.
Thank you very much. We'll now move on to our closed session consent agenda items, including the following: the appointment of Molly Kortner as a 10-month elementary assistant principal, the appointment of Katie Newhouse as a 10-month assistant principal, the appointment of Deanna Shore as a 10-month assistant principal, the appointment of Emily Beaumont as a 12-month director of early childhood curriculum and assessment, the appointment of Melissa Douglas as a 12-month dean of elementary literacy, the appointment of Daniel Holder as a 12-month special education director, the salary adjustment for Caroline Mueller, the dean of secondary language arts and world languages, the residency hearing officer report regarding a student's family residency dispute, the notice to remedy for Brian Sewell, the HR organizational report, and unless otherwise modified below, the board adopts and accepts the hearing officer's findings and recommendations in the following cases in which students expelled or suspended are prohibited from being on school grounds and school-sponsored activities with the prior written permission of the principal. The expulsion for student 2014 and student 2015 are held in abeyance contingent upon an expulsion and abeyance agreement for the entire 2017-18 year. The following there are no other EIAs, so I'll now take a motion and a second to approve
So moved.
these items. Moved
Second.
And seconded by Mr. Siegel. Any items that board members wish to have pulled for separate consideration?
11J.
11J. Okay. Any others? Now I'll have the coordinator call the roll on the approval of the closed session consent items not pulled.
Mr. Siegel,
Yes.
Mr. Connor,
Yes.
Mr. Dixon,
Yes.
Mr. Rollins?
Yes.
Mr. Scrivano?
Yes.
Mrs. McCulloch?
Yes.
The motion passes with 6 yeses and 1 absent.
I'll take a motion and a second for the item 11J, which is the HR organizational report and addendum.
So moved.
Moved by Mr. Connor,
Second.
second by Mr. Siegel. Any questions or discussion? Not, I will have the coordinator then call the roll on the approval of item 11J, the HR organizational report.
Mr. Connor,
Yes.
Mr. Dixon,
Abstain.
Mr. Rollins?
Yes.
Mr. Scrivano?
Yes.
Mrs. McCulloch?
Yes.
Mr. Siegel?
Yes.
The motion passes with 5 yeses, 1 abstain, 1 absent.
Thank you. Our next item on the agenda is the superintendent's report. Dr. Jarrett.
Thank you, Mr. Scrivano. I also want to second everyone's recognition of the service of Ted Biondo as a board member, a committee member, and certainly has had a huge impact in the district being in solid financial footing. And that leads into my next comment. It's a good thing that we do have a strong reserve position, because I am deeply concerned with where we are with the state of Illinois with Senate Bill 1 and the governor's mandatory veto. Just to give some background to the community, here's why I'm concerned. In the fiscal year 16, we were supposed to get 4 mandated categorical payments, and because of the 2-year budget standoff, which just recently ended, we only received 3 of the 4 payments. So that was a $6 million hit to the district. Mandated categoricals pay for things like transportation, special education, et cetera. These are really important services that we have to provide. As we just finished the FY17 budget, we have currently received 2 of the 4 payments. So that is a $12 million hit. Again, the reason is that the state has about $15 billion in unpaid bills. So the last issue that the state was dealing with over a 2-year period, where universities, colleges, social service providers, medical providers, and school districts all pay the price for that backlog, and that will have a very negative impact on our budget year that we're closing out. We do remain hopeful that because that budget is passed, that there will be some effort to at least make one of those two payments, but that's a huge, huge concern when you can't trust that payments for things like mandated categoricals will be made in a timely basis. And that leads into our current concern. The state of Illinois is a state where financial challenges abound for communities that have lower property wealth because we are more dependent than any state in the country on local property taxes. Senate Bill 1 is imperfect legislation, but it takes a huge step towards acknowledging the local effort a community like Rockford makes with a high tax rate, with the challenges we face, and really starts to take a step forward with the state of Illinois in terms of making sure that students that come from a low-income background and live in a community where property wealth is lower have closer to the educational adequacy target that we need as a state. We are billions of dollars away from what that annual target should be, but this is a step in the right direction, and it is the start of a multi-year commitment to start to straighten that out. For the Rockford Public Schools, it could mean as much as $5 million. There are very intense politics surrounding this issue right now, and we're deeply concerned about those issues. And what I am really focusing on right now is, number one, making sure that this amendatory veto and Senate Bill 1, that this is swiftly resolved. Why does that matter so much to us? The politics as usual, because we get paid twice a year from the state of Illinois with what are called general state aid payments, and the state just missed the first payment because of this issue. That's unacceptable. We spend about $1 million a day to run the Rockford Public Schools, and while people can take one side or another on this issue, I happen to personally feel very strongly that Senate Bill 1 is the right legislation. The larger challenge is that when a delay happens and payments get missed, we lose. What happened with the mandated categoricals is a classic example of that. So much of that money ends up not making it back. So we are in a situation as a district where I've asked our CFO to start to calculate how many days we can go on local property revenues. Then the second target we're going to look at is how many days we can go on our reserves. And I want to just make sure the community knows that the Rockford Public Schools are committed to making sure school starts on time and that we continue to educate our students. But I don't think we should have to make those kinds of calculations. I don't think we should have to speculate how many days we can run on reserves. And so when we get into situations where things get tough financially, we often have groups say, well, why don't you spend down more of those reserve dollars that you have? We have a board policy that has a 25% reserve. And this is exactly why, because sometimes the state doesn't make mandated categorical payments. Sometimes there's a standoff and where a general state aid payment is not made. So I just want the community to be aware that we are, number one, committed to making sure our students all receive a high-quality education, but we expect that those mandated categorical issues are addressed as quickly as possible, that the federal funding reform that is built into Senate Bill 1, which was incredibly important and something that we've been championing for 4 to 5 years now as a district to rectify, coupled with a real reform model that better balances state funding to help students in communities like Rockford. We need a resolution, and we need a swift resolution. So I'm going to be continuing to advocate for the state to resolve that, and I'm hopeful it's around the issue of Senate Bill 1. And I'm going to continue to keep the board and the community and all taxpayers, students, and everybody aware of the status of this to the best of my ability, and our team will certainly be as vigilant as possible to ensure that this issue gets addressed and that the equity that we need as a state makes significant progress. So, thank you.
Okay, we'll move on then to committee reports. Ms. McCulloch, the Ed Committee report.
So, the other thing y'all missed was we also acknowledged the nutrition contract was approved tonight. Both of those are incredibly exciting after all the time and And now we just have one more contract to approve, and that's the teacher contract. And our teacher's all about education, and so Education Committee is looking forward to some updates next week, August 15th, in this room at 5:30. We have two reports. One will be on smart sharing. It's a system that we're using in our classrooms, and we're going to filter down to the students now. But it's an initiative that's being done district-wide to help improve achievement, and so I'm looking forward to that report. And then the second report is on Innovate, right? What we're doing in some of the classrooms, and where are we at? I'm at Kennedy and Kishwaukee or Lincoln?
Elevate K-12 tutoring program was at 10 schools this past, maybe 9 schools, secondary schools in Barber.
Sorry, I said Innovate, and it's Elevate, and that's the one the board approved that we were doing it. We couldn't find math tutors locally, and so our students were doing it online with tutors, and it appears to, again, we'll be looking at the metrics during the Ed Committee meeting, but first glance is that it's been successful with many of our students. So, so that meeting will be next week. We did not meet last month, so I have no report from that. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Rollins, the Finance Committee report?
Finance Committee met here in this room last night, although we did not have a quorum. We are in the process of reconstituting the committee. I have identified 3 new community members who do want to join the committee, and so we expect them to join us in September. We had an informational meeting for that reason. We really only had one agenda item. We heard a report, just a regular update report from the district's new internal auditor. He just sort of gave us an overview of what he's been doing. One of the things he talked about, he has gotten into one of the schools, and when we use the word auditor, people tend to think, you're auditing cash transactions or, it's all financial. The auditor's function is really more of a risk avoidance, and his real function is to look at policies and procedures and see whether we're following policies and procedures, whether we've got the right policies and procedures in place. He is doing that both at the sort of for central administration, and he will be getting out into the schools. He did his first sort of comprehensive audit of one of our schools, Jefferson. He shared those results with the principal. He reported that the principal was very receptive. He's got a number of recommendations. His full report, which I'm not going to try to repeat, is available online in board docs in the library for the Finance Committee. So if you're really interested in everything that he had to report, I'd suggest you go online, take a look at that report, and you can see. The next Finance Committee meeting would normally be scheduled for, I believe it was September 4th, which happens to be Labor Day. So we agreed last night that we're going to move that because of some scheduling issues with the people who are planning to report at that meeting. We're actually going to meet on September 13th, which is a Wednesday, here in this room at 5:30 p.m.
Thank you. Mr. Connor, Operations.
Operations met in this room on Tuesday, August 1st at 6:30. Our next meeting will be September the 5th, Tuesday at 6:30. 3 of the items that we talked about, which were recommendations for contracts, are on the schedule tonight. 2 for R.L. Johnson and 1 for Bellis firm. The committee agreed on all those. A little bit of discussion. The thing probably of most interest to a lot of people is the custodial contract update. On that one, there's a more or less a list of concerns that were given to Airmark. Lack of management, unsupervised custodians, some compromised cleaning methods, poor communication. These are issues that were brought forward to them. Delay in equipment to the buildings, lack of custodial staff, which is probably the biggest concern right now. They're down roughly 45 FTEs, which is 23% under the staffing that they need. Then the last is time to emergencies. What I'll say is, and you have to bear with me for a moment, that of all the schools for the preparation on cleaning, roughly 3/4 of them are 90% complete or above, but there's a 1/4% that my estimate is roughly in the neighborhood of 60%. So there's a bit of work to get the schools all ready. As everybody remembers, we have a new contract with Aramark, and one of the things that we did emphasize at the committee meeting is that we wanted to have regular metrics brought to the ops committee. We suggested monthly, and then regular communications with stakeholders, especially the teachers. And that was a point of discussion, and there was agreement all the way around. The other big one is that we had a facilities plan, master plan update. We've already done quite a bit of the demolition on the site for the new school, on the footprint of the actual school itself. So that's running at a good pace. If everyone remembers that the one new school out in Cherry Valley is scheduled to open a year from this fall, but the other one, being at Kishwaukee, is actually 2 years out, and that was due to, from my point of view, delays related to some state red tape. I think September at the latest was the start date for the work on Kishwaukee. That was one of the facts. There's some numbers for fall housing that will come out in a month. And we talked a little bit about preliminary numbers on that. The last thing was that there is a board policy that's going to be updated related to criminal offender notification laws, and that I think is to put us in compliance with state law. And that was our meeting, and again, September the 5th. And I'm happy to report we have a full committee and had a quorum, so just saying, just saying.
Mr. Rollins, you have a question for Mr. Conner?
So is the red tape that you alluded to, has that been resolved?
As far as I know, I think all that has been, Mr. Schmidt, just nod your head, I think, Mr. Bailing, all the issues with the state are, we have full compliance. I mean, that did delay us, but right now, that was all.
Even the bees?
Even the
bees?
Okay.
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 Some killer bees here we gotta hear about.
Okay.
With the bees out there, we surveyed the property. We found no nests underground for that. We drafted a letter with the help of our outside legal counsel, sent it off to Illinois Department of Natural Resources. They actually submitted back to me today or yesterday saying we've completed everything that's obligated by the state. We're good to go. We're free and clear. So no bees, endangered bees.
And to answer the original question, help me out, Mr. Schmidt, the main issue was historical landmark related was the reason for the delays. And actually, there was some cost associated with that also. If I remember, 50,000 was the number or something?
Some of the stuff that we've already incurred until we got the permit from the reclamation district.
Can I just ask what would have happened if you had found bees?
I would have ran.
Okay.
Yeah, we would have had to relocate them.
yeah.
These are the type of bees, if I'm not mistaken, have their nest underground.
Oh, okay.
And can I ask, would we have had to have a volunteer process for that one?
There, okay.
Just asking.
Relocation.
Thank you. We'll move on then to our action items for tonight, which board policy, first one is board policy 8.30, which is the community relations visitors to and conduct on school property that Attorney Holy presented last board meeting. Is there a motion and a second to approve this policy?
So moved.
Moved by Mr.
Second.
Conner. Second by Mr. Siegel. Any questions or discussion? Not, we'll call the roll on the approval of board policy 8.30 revisions.
Mr. Dixon?
Yes.
Mr. Rollins?
Yes.
Mr. Scrivano?
Yes.
Mrs. McCulloch?
Yes.
Mr. Siegel?
Yes.
Mr. Conner?
Yes.
The motion passes with 6 yeses, 1 absent.
Our next action item is the real estate purchase at 528 Union Street. Mr. Schmidt presented that. Is there a motion and a second
So
to
moved.
approve?
Second.
Seconded by Mr. Siegel. Any questions or discussion? No? Okay. Have the coordinator then call the roll.
Mr. Rollins?
Yes.
Mr. Scrivano?
Yes.
Mrs. McCulloch?
Yes.
Mr. Siegel?
Yes.
Mr. Connor?
Yes.
Mr. Dixon?
Yes.
The motion passes with 6 yeses, 1 absent.
Then our next action item is the bilingual tutor compensation reclassification that was presented last board meeting. Is there a motion and a second to approve this?
So moved.
Moved by Mr. Connor.
Second.
Second by Mr. Siegel. Any questions or discussion? All right.
Oh,
Mr.
yeah,
Connor.
one question is on this, and maybe I missed it, is, I think one of the points was that we have difficulty finding the variety of languages that we've got. And one of the things is, what I wasn't 100% clear on is, do we actually have a staffing strategy related to this reclassification on that? How are we going to assure ourselves that we're going to get those skills?
In the last year, I've had, the one that we're really looking for the most is Swahili. That's our fastest growing language in the district right now. And last year, I recommended 3 different Swahili speakers who all were unable to accept the position because of the pay structure. We have a really good relationship with the AAA group here in town, the Latino Coalition. All of those groups direct and send people to us that are looking for positions specifically with the schools. They really want to work for us. And so many of those members reach out to Swahili speakers who also speak English and say, hey, this is something that's needed at the school. So there are those languages in our community. We just haven't been able to be marketable to them yet.
I guess my point would be, I totally understand the situation. I think my question was more around, is our strategy going to reach out to these groups and that's who we depend on? Or is there another method that would be, if you will, more reliable in terms of getting especially some of the harder to find languages?
Well, the primary will be reaching out to these groups because they're the ones that have the immediate contact with the English speakers and the other language speakers that are in our community right now. But we can then, there's other, we're going to advertise differently, seeking out from other areas and other communities. They'll be posted on our website, other recruiting services, and like right now with Rock Valley Refugee Services and Catholic Charities, right now we have a pool that is pretty, that is a good pool.
Okay. And thank you for answering my questions that I had, because I think what I had trouble with in the proposal was more from the fiscal analysis of, okay, we're going to spend more money to we're going to raise the salary level for tutors so that we can fill these vacancies, but I wanted to be assured that there actually was a budget to what the maximum should be and all that kind of stuff. So yeah, that wasn't clear to me, but you guys answered my questions, so I appreciate that. So, any other questions or comments? All right, then I'll have the coordinator then call the roll on the approval of the bilingual tutor compensation reclassification.
Mr. Scrivano?
Yes.
Mrs. McCulloch?
Yes.
Mr. Siegel?
Yes.
Mr. Connor?
Yes.
Mr. Dixon?
Yes.
Mr. Rollins?
Yes.
The motion passes with 6 yeses, 1 absent.
Okay, thank you. We're now on to new business, and Lori Holdley's going to present the intergovernmental agreement with the City of Rockford.
This is an agreement that would allow us to exchange facility use. So Rockford, the police department, and specifically Detective Danforth, would be allowed to use our facilities to run a program called the Rockford 5-0. It's a long-standing program. It's a basketball program for students. And in exchange, we would be able to use a house that the police have, and it would be used by our special ed students for learning life skills. I know Ms. Lawrence is here if she wants to provide more information about the specific use. If you have any questions about that, I'm sure she'd be happy to.
Okay, anybody have any questions? Okay. Any discussion or other questions for Larry? Not, this will be presented at our August 22nd meeting for a vote. Mr. Schmidt, you have the next three items, eminent domain for 2 and the IGA with the City of Rockford.
Yes, item 17B and 17C are two remaining properties, two of the few remaining properties that we need over by Kishwaukee. We feel that through the negotiations with the current owners of these properties, there is a need to push those forward to eminent domain.
The IGA?
The IGA, this IGA with the City of Rockford at the Kishwaukee area project is very similar to the IGA that we completed with the Village of Cherry Valley for the Cherry Valley School. At the time when we were doing some construction work out there for the new school, the City of Rockford requested that we do some water main distribution systems out there while we were tearing up everything, doing the water main conjunction into our new school and our property. We put this out there on the bid for the new school. It was an alternate. The board did approve the alternate. The alternate was $92,000. The City of Rockford said they will pay for that. So this is the intergovernmental agreement that once we complete the work, we send them an invoice for it and they will pay for this. Most likely this will be work done probably next summer.
Question.
Mr. Dixon?
Remember on the map that you showed us, were those slots 1, 2, or 3 for the eminent
No,
domain?
those are actually, I'll send that out. Those are the ones that were in red.
Okay.
The 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5 are the ones that we have not reached any agreement with yet.
Okay.
Any other questions or comments for Mr. Schmidt? All right, these will come for our vote on our August 22nd board meeting. Mr. Zediker, Teledoc.
Yes, we're bringing Teledoc to the board tonight. This was part of the ongoing negotiations with the different groups as part of our healthcare revamp. And so we are bringing to the board for discussion and then a vote to implement the proposed agreement with the Teledoc services. This is a service where our employees can call from home and Skype with a certified doctor to get diagnoses for your common flus, colds, and they can prescribe over the phone and Skype as well, so that that company does charge a per employee per month, and that's the estimation of the $54,000. But we are looking at a long-term savings so that our employees aren't going to urgent care, the ER, and doctors, and can do this from home.
Mr. Rollins?
I thought there was a typo in the executive summary, but there's not. The contract is effective February 1st, 2017, and it is, of course, now August 8th,
So
2017.
part of the contract and the delay bringing it to the board is that this was just part of an ongoing discussion with several of our bargaining units, and our RBMA group settled quicker and earlier than the other groups, and so that was part of our proposal within the bargaining net group, and so we worked with Teledoc to begin with that small unit, and as we were looking at our other groups who are today, voting on the 2 and then REA, hopefully working towards a closure with them, we were able to work out and continue to negotiate with Teledoc for the rates for the per employee per month, but we did end up starting because of the contractual agreement with RBMA back in February.
So they've been providing services since February? I just want to confirm that.
Yeah, that, you didn't answer that.
Right, we started initially, and Chris, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think February is when RBMA settled on that negotiation with the benefits, correct?
I guess I'm still not feeling like the question's answered.
No, I think the question's been answered.
So did it come to the board to
It did not. Nope, it was part of the.
Starting them in February?
Correct. It was not. The Teledoc program itself was approved by the board as part of negotiations, but it was not brought to the board when the contract with RBMA was settled.
Is there a reason?
We were just, because that was settled, we started that negotiation with Teledoc, and we started continuing negotiating, and we did not get it to the board until now because of the final
So they've
negotiation
been
with them.
providing that without any money because we didn't
We
approve
have not
any money
paid
for it?
anything with them yet.
Is that what it is?
Yep.
That's kind of.
We
the
have not
question.
paid them anything yet.
We have not paid them anything, but this contract from February is really for all of them? We can't just pay them for the one unit that was using it from February till now? and then,
Correct, because it'll be backdated for per employee per month, so when we get them on. We have looked at staggering because we don't have all of our groups yet settled, so we have estimated hopefully that if the REA settles and joins, we're looking at what month they could join into that, so it will change what our per employee per month rate would be. Up to this point with RBMA, the only people that have taken advantage of that, we've had 5 employees utilize that service.
and so the cost for us, for 5 employees to utilize that service over the last 6 months, do you know what that is?
We haven't paid anything with them yet, so we haven't paid anything to that contract.
Okay, I got that. But we're going to have to pay them from February on, right? This contract's from February?
Correct.
So it's a year-long contract. Are the teachers included in this contract?
They will be included in on this contract, correct?
So the money that we're going to pay for the first 6 months is for all the bargaining units, even though only 5 employees of one unit
No, we
used it? That's
no,
what I'm not understanding.
Yeah, part of the estimation for per month changes based on what bargaining unit is settling, and so we're not anticipating, we have not projected the REA to join this cost now, because they obviously have not settled, so it has changed each month as we add employees.
So for the first 6 months, we're only paying for the RBMA?
That is correct. When we put it together, because we recognized that as the contracts rolled out, we would have different contracts approved at different times. And so the pricing was set up on a tiered structure, and we had X number of employees, we pay this, and as it gets larger, the price per employee per month goes down. That was something that we took a little time to work through. We wanted to make sure they understood that there was a great opportunity for them as additional lives came on. We wanted to be able to have the contract reflect those costs. So you'll only be paying for the people who have agreed to it. In this case, the RBMA, we will only be paying per employee per month for the folks who are the RBMA. And then as additional groups approve the contracts and come onto the plan, then we'll be paying for them as well, starting at the time when they come on the contract. So if a contract is approved and there's somebody come in September, we would begin to pay a PEPM for them starting in September.
Okay, and I get that now, and I thank you for that, but I don't understand why you didn't bring it to us in February, since we were starting this in February, instead of backloading it, starting then and saying these others will be added in as, if they're contracts. So from a process standpoint, I don't understand that.
Yep, that was a mistake on our part as we were negotiating.
Mr. Connor.
2 questions. Number one, is the total of the $54,000, is that from February to next June? It covers that time period?
Yes.
Okay. So it's a year and 6 months or whatever that amount is. Okay. That's your $54,000 total. The second is there a restriction on the place where they can call from, since I assume HIPAA is involved if there's a discussion? So if it's over the phone, there has to be some kind of rules of the road that they're not calling from the middle of a classroom or whatever.
So they can call probably from wherever they would like. At that point in time, they're going to be responsible for who can hear them. Generally speaking, most of the time, this is going to be calls from home, and the person can call in. They do need to go in and register, so they will receive the rules of the road when they do that. They won't actually be able to meet with a physician virtually until they actually go through, do a quick questionnaire. They can do that when they first call in. We're actually encouraging people to do that beforehand. Most people don't want to have to go through that process of giving them all their information when they're feeling bad.
My question, though, was not about the permission on that side. It was about HIPAA, because, as you know, you really can't talk to somebody about anything medical in an open setting. So I guess what I'm asking is, are there rules of the road on that?
So
would we have any liability if somebody did talk about a medical condition in front of others?
While I am not an attorney, generally speaking, if somebody puts their
Have you ever played one on TV?
No, we've done that.
Sorry.
But generally speaking, if somebody chooses to put their information out in the public, I believe that's their responsibility. So if somebody wanted to come
Somebody
in
needs to look into that, because I don't think that's the way HIPAA works, but because when I saw Skype and the rest, I'm like, again, not an expert, but I'd at least like somebody to come back and assure that we have no part to that on that process. Any liability for, if you will, public discussion. Yeah, because I'm not sure that essentially It is on the person who's calling in one sense, but.
Right, and we obviously
that.
encourage people not to do that.
Right.
In an
I'd just like to know what liabilities, if any, we have.
We can make sure that we.
And with that in mind, part of the process of connecting or signing up for this, how do we make sure that there must be a photograph from the district that confirms that that's our employee, because
There is an
my
eligible-
sister, I could put her on because she's really sick and she needs some medication, and, if you don't what is our check system?
There is an eligibility file that's being provided by the district to Teledoc so that they have a list of every person who's eligible under the plan.
With a picture?
Not with a picture. If you were to go to your doctor's office right now with a medical card, there's no picture on your medical card, the information.
But when I go to my doctor's office, I have to give a driver's license or some other item to prove that I am who I am and it matches my insurance card. So yes, we do have to do that in this day and age.
Okay.
And I can't imagine that we wouldn't want to verify that with the people who are using this, so that the system doesn't get abused and they don't have, relatives or other people calling in because they're sick and no, could you check into that too, please? Oh, I do.
Yeah, I've
I don't
never
know who
had
you,
to show
well,
my
Swedish American, for God's sake, I don't. Don't they? They absolutely do. Okay, so the $54,000 that we're going to pay for the year, that's not going to change. How much we have to reimburse them for each call changes?
No, so the PEPM does change as additional people come on. It actually goes down. I don't know with the 54,000 if that was calculated based on an expectation of when certain units would come on and how long they would be on for the year.
It's a calculation.
So
this was calculated including all the bargaining units?
Correct.
So it won't go up and you're covered, and if it doesn't get part of it?
Correct.
And then in addition to that, we do pay per call?
yes. There will be a split, so there's still a copay that employees will need to pay, and then the additional cost of the visit will fall to the district. Generally speaking, if you were to go in and have a regular doctor's office visit, it's somewhere between, with Blue Cross, $80 to $120 is normally the average where that falls in. A normal call to Teledoc would be $40, of which $15 would be required to pay by the member. The other $25 would fall as an expense to the district.
I actually don't have a problem with that. No. Because I think it's,
Okay. I just have to ask. So, it's already been, 6, 7 months. So what if the board decides to say, no, we don't want this?
Okay.
Are we accountable for 54,000?
You're not.
Okay. Right. What are we?
I would just like to add that with Teledoc is a very, very positive thing for employees. It increases access to medical care quickly and reduces our costs because they're not running to an urgent care center or to emergency room. And I think this will be hugely successful.
And I believe that actually if you start really looking around, you're finding that virtual care is becoming a standard. There's almost no carrier out there that doesn't have some form of virtual care in place, particularly because it's becoming very popular and very successful. And Teledoc is, in fact, one of the largest and best providers out there.
You're next.
So while you wouldn't have liability except for the use that has already happened with Teledoc, we certainly would have a large liability with our bargaining units who we agreed to provide this program to. No, the board knew all about it. This is what you voted for, well, you weren't on the board at the time, but the board voted for RBMA and the hearing interpreters last summer to include this program. And also the agreements you just did tonight.
Right, yeah, that's right.
And the bus drivers.
And the bus drivers, Okay, any other questions? If not, this will be approved or go for a vote at our next board meeting. Mrs. Lawrence, you are next with a subscription.
Evening, my first go around, so go easy on me.
Okay.
So, Infinitec is an online subscription that provides access to trial assistive tech equipment for our students with disabilities prior to us purchasing them. Right now, we have 53 students that will be aging out at some point during this school year that don't have an assistive tech device that we've been able to take data, track data with to be able to work with the students' independent insurance so that they can have that when they leave us. So that's kind of an issue. And then we also have about 200 other students that are not aging out that do not have appropriate assistive tech devices. So that's the primary purpose of this. The other benefit that this has is that there's about 600 learning pathways that you can piece together to provide PD for us. It would be primarily used for our paraprofessionals that we really have no way to on demand, give them professional development in the areas that they need it.
Could you give some examples of the devices that you're talking about?
Yes, as a matter of fact, I brought with some pictures.
Okay. Okay. Sure.
So that's all of the assistive tech devices that they would work with us to lend, lease, and/or purchase. So things like layovers on computer keyboards that
Communication devices.
Communication devices,
Okay.
yep. FM for the hearing impaired, layovers for the computer keyboards so that they're easier to type.
Mrs. McCulloch probably knows all about these things.
She knows a lot about it.
Okay. Mr. Rollins.
So I guess what I'm not clear on is, are these devices that the district is purchasing, or this is devices that the individuals will be?
It would be both. So what's happening, we have a lot of devices that are very old, and we kind of fit those devices to the student right now. Because we have to work with all the different types of lending libraries. This is one place that we could go to get the lended devices instead of working with all the different companies. It's very difficult to find the right device for a student. They also provide us with that assistance if needed.
Okay.
Any other questions? Ms. McCulloch?
Well, can't we get some assistance from the state as well if they are Medicaid and?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. I failed to mention that this also, the subscription is for all students, all teachers, and all families. So there could be professional development for gen ed teachers, for administrators, for parents and families that we could piece together.
Thank you. Any other questions for Ms. Lawrence? Not, this will come for a vote at our next board meeting. Thank you. Mr. Schmidt, a piano. You didn't bring it? No, okay, come on. Okay.
It's quite large. Not
Okay.
that large, really. Ms. Sperling was contacted by Mrs. Burke that they had, and her husband, that they had a piano at their house that they no longer used, and they would like to donate it to the Rockford School District to be used in one of the school buildings. Ms. Sperling looked out there and looked at the piano, researched the value of the piano. It was in good condition, decided to put it out at Lincoln Middle School. It's one of our faster-growing music programs. We've done some renovation and relocated some of that out there. Based on some of the research, the retail value of this thing would be about $7,000. Used is $3,000 to $5,000. On some of the other things, we looked at the average cost of it and the condition it's in. We anticipate that it should be approximately about $4,000. So it's a great little addition to the music program over at Lincoln Middle School. So our recommendation is the board accept this gift.
Mr. Connor?
Just wanted to say thank you to Mrs. Burke and her husband. Truly appreciate the generosity. And for those of you that are still listening, we always love donations as well as volunteers.
There you go. Are there any incurred expenses for the district with?
No, just picking it up and moving with the individuals that we have.
Okay.
So.
Maintenance?
It could be maintenance. I have no idea. I've never done any maintenance on a piano.
Okay.
Yeah, that's about that one. That's very much a specialty.
I thought
on that.
Maybe Mr. Smith was going to play
Yeah,
a tune
no.
for us.
Whatever repairs would have to be done by an expert because
Right, yeah, it's very high tech.
it is high tech on virtually all of it. Yeah, it's not easily to
Okay.
repair.
This will come up for a vote at our next board meeting. Mr. Bailing, you're next on the architect recommendations.
So, good evening. In the packet, there are 3 architectural contracts, and before I present each individual one, just want to give a brief background about the Professional Services Selection Act. So unlike construction, labor, and materials where we have to go out for a public bid, architects and engineers are considered a professional service by the state of Illinois, and they're picked on their qualifications. One of the ways that we can pick them on their qualifications is based on a satisfactory relationship with the district for work that they've already done for us. And that's the case with all 3 of these tonight. The first one is for Richard L. Johnson Associates for the deconstruction of 7 schools. These are schools that are identified in the Facilities Plan Oversight Committee report as being no longer needed eventually. 4 of them already need to be erased due to intergovernmental agreements that we have with either the Park District or Cherry Valley, the village of Cherry Valley. And the other 3 are ones that we might end up demolishing. Each one of these will be authorized on an individual basis, so just because we approve this contract doesn't mean we're committed to demolishing the additional 3 buildings at this time, and we won't incur costs if something comes up where we decide not to. Walker is one of them. As you know, Walker went through a RFP process with the city as a partner with us, and unfortunately there were no takers to redevelop that property. So that one will probably be the first one that we design for demolition under this agreement. So any questions on the demolition design contract? Okay.
I shouldn't even bother, but, so this is news to me that you use an architect to deconstruct. I thought you just hired somebody to knock it down and haul everything away. So what exactly does the architect do?
Yeah, so Richard L. Johnson did this similar service on the old administration building. So if there's some, in addition to all of the stipulations with the village and the Park District, is the drawings we need to have done to tell the contractors what stays and what goes, as well as to provide some type of basic information about the structure as far as how it's constructed and the size, so we can kind of get level playing field on the proposals we get in from the demolition contractors. Legal has a lot of emphasis, always reminding us to make sure we have as many bidders as possible and that they're all looking at the same thing. So that's part of the reason we do that. Also, we need to have a licensed design professional to get actually we have to get a permit from the ROE for these projects as well. So.
All right.
Mr. Connor?
One thing I will say is that for all these, the 3 items Mr. Bailey's talking about, we did discuss actually those very issues at the operations committee, and we spent a bit of time talking about that very process and got everybody comfortable with the idea.
Yep. Okay.
All right, the next one is for window replacements at 3 schools, and Richard L. Johnson Associates has completed probably with the exception of East High School, our 4 largest window replacement projects, Flynn Middle School, Kennedy Middle School, West Middle School, and so Flynn, Kennedy, West, and there's one more which will come to mind, Lincoln, and then they also did Washington, which is a fairly large building, so we've had a very good track record with them. This fee is in line with what they charged on a much larger volume of work, and I think these 3 buildings add up to approximately $250,000. So any questions on that one? Okay. And the final one is for 18 buildings for masonry restoration with Bellis Firm of Architecture. As Richard L. Johnson has experience with us doing those 2 types of projects, they most recently did the masonry restoration at Roosevelt for us. And basically these projects will be completed over the next several years. I should also mention that the window projects and this masonry restoration are part of our deferred maintenance program. As you may recall, of the $279 million, there's the $250 in the facilities master's plan. Then there was $13 million worth of furniture, and then $16 million worth of deferred maintenance projects. And so we're pretty much have all the contracts for design, with the exception of a couple of small things at McIntosh under contract right now. And so we're starting to knock out the deferred maintenance portion of that overall $279 million program. So Any questions
When
about
is,
the masonry?
when is that work actually going to be done, and
Yeah, so-
masonry?
Yeah, the masonry is in, I think we're talking about a total of 4 seasons. Let me grab my list here just to double check.
I'm assuming that, is that done only when the schools are not open, or is it can be done anytime?
It can be done during the school year. We just have to be, sensitive to what types
Safety.
of activities happen while kids are in the building. If it's the time of year when windows might be open, if it's a non-air conditioned building, obviously we don't want to be grinding near an open window. It's not particularly noisy work, but it does generate a little bit of dust and debris. And right now, it looks like we have projects scheduled over a course of 3 years for the masonry, and the windows would be over 2 years.
Okay. Mr. Rollins?
I'm just looking at the list of schools and I'm missing it. I don't think Lincoln's on there. Of course, Lincoln's a big masonry school. It doesn't need anything?
Well, it's not on the list of deferred maintenance projects that we developed. I would like to probably defer to Mr. Schmidt if he's still available, because I was not here when we developed this list, so if I may.
Lincoln was one of the schools that the district did in the tuck pointing restorations, I believe in the late 90s, early 2000. So as we look at that, it was initially done out there. Where it falls again is on the new life cycle plan that we brought the operations committee on the tuck pointing, which is going to be basically work that starts from 2023 onwards. These are ones that are all going to be work that's going to be completed before 2022. It's kind of when we started the capital plan, the 10-year plan, there was additional work that we had out there that was included in this that we knew that we had to be done. So these 18 schools are in that first chunk. Lincoln, with several other schools, is everything on the future life cycle plan past 2023.
Okay. Any other questions for Mr. Bailing? If not, these will come for a
Thank you.
vote at our August 22nd board meeting. If there are no further comments or agenda recommendations by the board, I'll take a motion and a second to adjourn.
So moved.
Moved by Mr. Connor,
Second.
second by Mr. Siegel. All those in favor say aye. Opposed, same sign. We are adjourned at 8:33.